Why is it that we choose to follow the rules most of the time? Why is it that when an official asks us to do something, we choose to do it instead of break the rules? Why is it that we are so structured in our social lives? This brings up one of the core issues in the field of sociology, and it's called the problem of social order. The problem of social order addresses why we choose to follow rules. An interesting thing is happening today with films and television shows. There are a lot of films and TV shows out there today that talk about this notion of the post-apocalyptic world where somehow the rules have broken down and chaos ensues. One of the best examples of that is The Walking Dead. Now, of course, we're not talking about the zombies here. What we're actually talking about is the inability for different groups to cooperate with each other. They all have their own personal moral codes that they live by, and those codes are vastly different from each other. And this makes it really difficult for Rick and his group to meet up with other people, other groups, and make assumptions about how they will behave. There's a whole slew of movies out there that are kind of set in this kind of post-apocalyptic world also. Elysium was one from a couple of years ago, The Hunger Games, of course, the Divergent series. All of those films really address a world where the rules that govern how we behave in the world around other people have broken down. So one of the things that's interesting there is in our world today, we do choose to look out for one another. We choose to obey the law and other rules. And we do choose to invest in our future. And the only reason we can really do that is because we've made a commitment to follow the rules just like everybody else. Now, of course, you might say, well, there are lots of people out there that don't follow the rules. There are lots of people out there who don't look out for other people. And that may be the case, but the vast majority of us follow the rules every single day. If we didn't follow the rules, it would be a vastly different world every single morning when we walked out the door. So the problem of social order brings up two really important concepts, the concept of cooperation and the concept of coordination. Each of these is a need that needs to be met, not only by the individual, but also by the bigger picture, the society in which we live. So first, we have to recognize that we as individuals are also social creatures. Not only do we want our own personal needs to be met, we also have expectations of what's going on with other people out in the world. We also need to be, or want to be, happy. We don't want to live a miserable life. And in order for that to happen, we have to rely on other people around us to be happy. Consider this. If you were a prisoner and you had no possibility of parole, life in prison, and you were surrounded by people who also were under the same circumstances, how unhappy you might be, and the other people around you also might be unhappy, and that feeds off of each other. Imagine also if you lived by yourself on a deserted island, how unhappy you might be. So this tells us that we are social beings, that our lives are reflective of what's going on in the lives of other people around us. So because we need to have our needs met, our need of happiness, tension starts to happen between what I need personally and what the group needs collectively. So there are two components that need to be addressed in order for social order to happen. Coordination and cooperation are both requirements that create order. And when we don't coordinate or we don't cooperate with each other, anomie happens. Now remember, anomie is a term that Emile Durkheim used, and it represents when normlessness happens in society. And a great example of that could be the French Revolution. Now, Durkheim was born after the French Revolution, but I'm sure that he understood the revolutionary period in France, which was the late 1700s, to be a period of time where when an individual walked outside, they couldn't be sure of what was going to happen. As the revolution got into full swing, people really weren't sure about whether or not they could be safe in the social world. So Durkheim would have said that coordination requires some stability and predictability in a society, knowing that we can rely on the world around us to, quote unquote, behave in a predictable way allows us to be able to coordinate our life with the lives of others. It's really important, although invisible, that we have this coordination structure out there to depend on every single day. A good example of that in our lives today would be how we drive. We don't just get in our car and decide to do whatever we want to do. We abide by, for the most part, we abide by the rules and regulations of the road. We drive on the side of the street that we're supposed to drive on. We stop when we see a red light. We go when we see a green light. We are mindful, hopefully, of the people that are driving around us. And we don't try to just go out there and be a road warrior doing what we want to do. So that's the type of coordination that we're talking about here. Having that kind of structure out there that allows us all to assume that other people are basically going to behave in the same way that we are when we come in contact with them. Cooperation is doing things that benefit other people, not just ourselves. And so if we have high levels of coordination, if the structure is working to support us, this allows us to also cooperate with each other. So here is where the individual decides, I will follow those rules and laws. They are beneficial to us all. I might do some volunteer work to benefit other people in society. Oftentimes in our society, that translates to giving money or food to charities. If we don't have this kind of cooperation in a society, people will become really individualistic and they will start looking out only for themselves. It's the world of Mad Max. When we have that lack of cooperation, collective action starts to decrease in a society, and then the needs of all members of society start to go unmet. One of the ways that that translates in the real world is with low voter turnout. When we as individuals perceive that politicians aren't meeting our needs, then we don't turn out to vote. We think to ourselves, what's the point? They're not doing anything for us. We might as well not bother. Another aspect of lack of cooperation is that crime will increase because people will stop following the rules. They feel like, why should I follow the rules when the rules aren't benefiting me or the people around me? And so they begin to break the law. They begin to act in deviant ways or unpredictable ways. They start to serve their own interests without considering how those interests might impact the others around them. This is a serious issue in today's world. And I think we can see this notion of lack of cooperation in politics in the United States today. Many people feel like the politicians that have been elected by us are serving their own interests and their own needs over the needs and interests of the people of America. And this is problematic for us because we become disenfranchised and we start to believe that the rules that are put in place are not beneficial to us. They're only beneficial to a few select individuals. Now, when cooperation is working well, we pull together. So an example of that would be 9/11. Volunteers flooded that ground zero area. Businesses around the area gave free food to the rescuers and the victims. People donated, celebrities raised money, and this lasted for an extended period of time. So when we are feeling like the structure is working or we need to pull together, that's a high level of cooperation. We set aside our own personal need and instead we respond to the needs of many. We also see this happening oftentimes in natural disasters. A whole entire community will pull together to benefit an individual. This might require some sacrifices on the part of those individuals who are helping, but they feel the need to cooperate so that they can fix the group, so that they can put everything back to some kind of reasonable social order. So cooperation and coordination are both components that are required to create a world that we want to live in. We must have social order and we should not take that order for granted. And further, we have to have public policy which addresses issues that make it difficult for people to want to cooperate. So as a recap, coordination is predictability. It's living in a society where the rules are beneficial to most people and most people are following those rules. Cooperation is overcoming our own individual self-interest and benefiting the needs of society. Both of these components are essential components and are fascinating areas of study for sociologists. We as sociologists always have an interest in trying to understand cooperation and coordination and how they impact not only the individual, but also the structure of society. Until next time, take care.